You are still sort of, I mean, you're healed now, but you're still experiencing a lot of changes, I'm guessing. So I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, I mean, you were so right about like the when I was telling you I was still kind of having problems on that F sharp uh in my range. And then when you talked about like I don't think your tongue's going up as much as it can because it's not used to doing it. And then I just worked on that for the last couple days and I'm like, oh, there it is. And sure enough, like I sang it the service, and 8 a.m. is always just awful to sing at. But it was there and it was fine. And it was like, voila. So it was just nice not to freak out that it was like back or anything. And it was just like
Yeah.
just realizing that it's still a muscle and that you have to work on it and you have to like implement all the exercises and just it's not that you're relearning to sing, but I think it's like realizing that you have more ways that you can move than you did before.
Yeah, totally. Couldn't have put it better myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, so this was happening like last week, and we were nervous because with the release, it just went away instantly and then it started to come back. But it wasn't because, honestly, like you were healing or anything. It's just because the body was trying to do the old thing still. Yeah.
Mhm.
So was this something, just to clarify, before the release, this was something that just kind of happened all the time and it was like a bullet you had to take, basically.
Oh yeah, like I could not figure it out. And like think I had three voice teachers. I was like, I don't know what's happening. And I'd have them listen. They're like, well, this is probably just your reflex. And I was like, but it only happens on F and F sharp. Like, I was like, something's going on. And then I would say probably 9 times out of 10, the voice teachers would always be like, well, you're not supporting. You're not using your abdominals. And I'm like, I am. Like, I am. And we would get a little change, but I don't think it was doing what they thought. Like I would stand on a balance disc
Mhm.
and there would be a slight change. But what I know now about fascia is like I was like, all that's happening is you're adjusting the fascia, so there's probably some relief happening there. But the minute you go stand right back down on the floor, it
Yes.
doesn't it doesn't change. And so they were like, well, you're just not using your abdominals correctly. And I was like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah, yeah, and you're just like, stay calm. Yeah. I know. Well, yes, you said that perfectly. I love that. Yeah, it's like a manufactured release. And that's also something that can happen in vocalises. And I know that can be frustrating even when people have tongue ties. That's a common thing where it's like, well, I can do the vocalese perfectly, but I can't do it, in a full line when I'm running out of breath or whatever. And that's because vocalises are designed to isolate. But when you're singing an aria, you can't isolate that cleanly. You have to do everything all at once. You have to sing the consonants. You have to sing the vowels on the page. You don't get to choose what vowel you want and, everything else. And if you're on stage, sometimes you can't even choose like what body position you're in because you have to do the staging, right? So that's when all these things come out. So, yes, I love that. So, I think we can safely say that we can say goodbye to ever for scratchy FF sharps. Yeah.
good riddance.
Goodbye. And even if it does come back, you're like, oh, I just have to do this. Done.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, we love that feeling. It's the best. Awesome.
It is.
Okay, great. Tell me more. Anything else?
Yeah. I'm just like reading about these palate, like how the palate is formed based on like where the tongue is and how it affects our structural growth, like in the skull and everything. I sat there and I was like
Yeah. Well,
mind blown, but also like the appreciation that you have for anyone who attempts to go into professional singing, like the to have a perfect skeleton, to have a tongue that works, to have a palate that does this, to have pharyngeal movement. Like, I'm like, so many odds are stacked against you at the same time based on your anatomy and physiology.
Hmm.
It's not just this, like, if I work hard kind of thing. It's like, no, no, we're at the mercies of our anatomy so much more. And so it just kind of made me realize, especially like writing this dissertation and like as a voice teacher and somebody who performs, to take the burden off of ourselves and this like you have to have da 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 da, and it's like, no, this is so much bigger, and there's so many more intricacies that I think a lot of people aren't putting into the picture of like the performance.
Yes, definitely. It gives an, excuse me, it gives a new meaning to you are your instrument, right? You really understand that in a different way. And I think the world needs to be talking about this more, not just for like, the emotional upheaval that it gets to release, but also because there are so many singers who are going through things as a human, not realizing that it could also improve their singing. Some people are like, oh, I have really bad TMJ, so I'm getting a night guard, but they don't connect those dots to, oh, that's why I always have trouble in my lower register. It's actually the same thing. So, and unfortunately, there's even some people, some teachers who say, like, oh, don't get ortho, don't do this or that, because it could make your singing worse. And you're like, why would making your body and your life better ever make your singing worse? That makes no sense to me. Anyway, I'm preaching to the choir.
Well, then the other thing was like, right, I've talked to a friend and they were like, they DM'd me because I posted pictures of me getting a frenectomy on Facebook. And they were like, can you tell me more about that? And I was like, yeah, what do you want to know? And they were like, well, my voice teacher was like, her tongue tie's so obvious. Like she has one of those ones that's like pretty severe, like all the way to the tip, can't lift.
Your friend,
And
you mean?
yeah. And she was like, yeah, they discovered I had this tongue tie, the voice teacher did. And they were like, we just need to work with the anatomy we're given. You don't need to make those adjustments. You need to work with the body that you're given. And I was like, what? It just kind of like blew my mind, I guess, in the essence that it's like all this research that I've been doing on tongue ties and the issues that they cause. And I'm like, it's so frustrating because I'm like, you don't have to live like this. You don't have to live like this.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, it also frustrates me because, it's an unfortunate mathematical equation that, 50 years ago, before anybody knew anything about singing and tongue ties, that people who didn't have tongue ties probably sang a little better, sang more freely, sang with less pain. They became famous, they became teachers, they taught people. They separated, like the good singers who they could teach because they could move their tongues and the people that couldn't and they couldn't. And, it's sort of like a self-sifting process and you leave all these people out. And it does seem a little cruel to me sometimes that teachers are like, well, that's just the way it is. And you're like, well, you're not in constant pain. So don't tell me that's the way it is because you don't actually know what this is like. And not only that, but it's a real dream crusher for sure.
oh, I mean, I sit here and I just advised, referred Sally, Sally,
Yeah.
17. I'm 38 and you sit there and you're like, what would it have been like
What would it have been like?
if I would have had a voice teacher be like, by the way,
Right. How
you
many
know.
years of physical pain, years of emotional pain? How many more opportunities would I have had? How many more opportunities would I have gotten because I could progress so much faster? How much faster could I learn because I could do what I understand instead of understanding it and not being able literally to do it? Yeah, the list goes on and on, right?
It's just wild to me
Yeah.
because it's like, okay. But I mean, I'm sure you go through the whole thing. Well, I'm glad I'm learning this. I can pass that information down so that somebody else doesn't have to go through what I went
Absolutely. Absolutely.
through. And I mean, like, there's the joy and in that, and it's just like, it, I don't know. I just feel like it's just such a interesting component to voice that's not being discussed more.
Yeah.
And it should be, but it's odd that we talk about this because you know I can't even tell you how many times people have told me like you don't need to put tongue ties in your dissertation, and I'm like
I had a giggle about that. That kept coming up in my brain this past week, and I just had to have a little giggle about it every time because I love what you said is just so perfect. That nobody needs to know about that. Exactly. So I'm gonna write about it. Perfect. Case in point. Thank you so much.
and it's like it's so tough, right? Because like I had to put like a little this I don't know what you would call it in my thing because it's for choral directors. I hate dissertations because they have to be like so specific to the audience, and I'm like, can it just be for everyone, please? But
Yeah.
like, I have to say to the choral director. But it's so tough because it's like I had to put in there. Not everyone can afford to go get a tongue tie release, or they might have to wait for a little bit. And so it's like, do you need to know about this? Yes, but ultimately it's up to the person to decide what they want to do with their tongue tie. But I do think we have a responsibility as educators to share this kind of information and to also point students and people into the direction of those like you, and refer them to specialists who can help them. And then they get to decide what is their vocal trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I liken it to if you're a teacher and you suspect that your student has a node, are you just going to keep that to yourself and make them keep singing the whole 2 hours? Are you maybe going to mention that they should go see an ENT so they can diagnose them, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like, um, I don't know. It's interesting because I'm like, I've been like so fascinated about like fascia and the tongue. And it's so funny when I start sharing this and I see other professors are like, so interesting to me. I'm like, oh, you don't want to know about this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, why? Why?
It does
And
seem to be a very dividing idea for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but that is interesting.
and then it was so interesting. I was sharing this information with another colleague and they were like, ugh. And I was like, you okay? And they were like, well, I thought I had learned everything about vocal pedagogy and now there's this information.
Well, you know what? They have a point. Why on earth aren't the pedagogues obsessed with this? I don't know.
I think it's coming. I think it'll, I think
Yeah, hopefully it's coming. Hopefully it's coming.
it'll be kind of, it has to be coming. Like,
Hopefully.
you can't like, and I put like that beautiful picture of the base of the tongue and that giant sheet of fascia all the way down to the tip of the toes.
Love that one.
Like you're gonna tell me that the tongue tie is not connected to all the body systems?
Yeah, it
Like
is.
that is like evidence.
Yeah, and like opera is a very closed circuit system, our own little safe niche, and that's insulated and protected us in a lot of ways. And I think we do it because we know the rest of the world may not understand us. But what's fascinating is that I go out to my normal human medical community and they are all on board. They're like, oh yeah, the tongue and the shape of your foot arch and your second left toe and this and that. And they're like all in it, your first left molar and how that's, they're all about it. And then you come over into the opera community and for better and sometimes worse, they're like, oh, we're going to do these vocalises that existed 200 years ago. And you're like, great, but maybe also some new things.
No. Like, I'm
Like,
like,
yeah.
it, it just blows my mind. It's like, well, the only reason why pedagogy and like exists in schools is because they kept finding new information about the voice. Like, that's what it does, is like it continually like reevaluates itself because we get more knowledge about what we actually learn about the body.
Mhm.
And it just like kind of like blows my mind that it's like, I don't know, it's accepted some places and not others. And I'm just like, why is there this like resistance if
Yeah.
you can do something better and easier? Like singing doesn't have to be such a managed process. Like, and it goes, we're designed, I think, to sing. Like I genuinely believe that. But side note, they have a toe spacer. Have you heard of this thing?
Yeah, the toe spacer's so cool.
I was like, what? I've been doing all this research and I was like, all right, I'm gonna order one. They're
Mhm.
14.
Actually, you know what? I have something hilarious to show you. You're gonna laugh your ass off when you see this. Ready? I
What?
have a self-made toe spacer in right now.
Yes.
Science.
Just like, what? Now with the fascia, I was like, you're killing me. Like I was just like, this is incredible.
That's so funny. Oh, that's hilarious. All my
It's
secrets are coming out.
fun. Well, as they should. I
They
like it.
should. Yeah, I think it is interesting. Like, the more I learn and discover, like, I wonder if some people think of this as like science and religion, the old world versus the new world. And I'm like, I can see how it could be like received like that if it's your first impression is just like to be dumped on with all this stuff. It can be totally overwhelming. Absolutely. But everything that I've learned and discovered and watched with everybody is not disproving the old world thought of singing. In fact, it's helping it, it's proving it true. Like you said, singing can be easy. It can be where everything's involved in a dynamic, relaxed, integrative way. And it should be, and it can be for everyone, you know? So, yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm pro science, but
I
I'm
know.
also pro old world too. I mean, the old time singers, guess what? They're doing the tongue things that we talk about. I've seen them in their videos. They're doing it. They just don't use, the anatomical muscle names, and that's fine.
I know. It's so funny. I talk about this in my dissertation. I looked up this whole thing on retention and like the forgetting curve, as well as like body mapping. And I talk about this in the choral rehearsal process that it is so vitally important that you help your choir members understand their body and where it is in relation to like directions because we're so unaware
Yeah.
because like we don't and especially like the tongue in general, like the tongue makes so many automatic movements that we're just so unaware of. Like that's what I was noticing with the exercises you were giving me, like having me touch my tongue and then it would move. And I was like, that's so bizarre that we're so unaware of like how big our tongue is, where it's how it does things. But if we touch it with our own finger, automatically our brain can associate like where those movements are. But if we don't body map that and help people like understand more about their bodies, I'm just kind of like, you're fucked. And it's just like So, but it's just like, how do we help people understand their bodies so that they can have more autonomy over their bodies, you know?
Yes, yes, and more control. Like to me, not just because of my personality, but like control should be, in this case, a good word because you're the person driving the car, right? You're driving the singer car. You want to be able to control where you're going and how fast. And if you can't control it, like saying a prayer and hoping and opening your mouth is not a plan. And even if you're on the Met stage, I would be pooing my pants using that as a plan. That's not a plan. Like you need to know what's going to happen, when, and exactly how it's going to turn out. And that's where I believe true confidence and real artistic freedom comes from because you don't have to worry and you even don't have to plan because the plan's made in the 3 months before that. So then you really do get to live in the moment, in the zone, in that like true glorious soup that we all want to partake in.
It's it is such a different feeling when you know. And I've expressed that same thing like after the tongue tie and just singing at church, which is low stakes anyway. But like you still get nervous. I don't care. But it's like when I've just these couple times I've gotten to sing after the frenectomy, it's just like I'm like, oh, I know what it's gonna do. You're just not sitting there like, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen. It's the worst feeling
It
as
is.
a singer.
Mhm.
It is a such a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
And I
I
and I
Please
I
go.
think you're right. Oh no, you're right. And like that's how like control can be such a good word.
Mhm.
And it's like it's how we use that word, right? And like how we help the body because we have to control our body to do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The tennis star is not like just gonna see what hand fate puts the racket in, like yeah, I remember before my first tongue tie release that I did not practice ever because I couldn't stand it. It was like somebody gave me a pair of dice and told me to go into a practice room and roll double sixes every time. And I couldn't, I was like, literally, what is the point of this? Everything's just like luck of the draw. Like, what? It doesn't matter how many times I roll this dice. I'm never going to be able to get a double six every time. That's just stupid, you know? And then the tongue tie, if we're going to follow through this metaphor, the tongue tie is like I bought a pair of dice that had double sixes everywhere. And I'm like, okay, now we're good. Great. Done. Easy. So practicing actually has a purpose now. And you learn faster with no emotional toil and existential despair of why can't I get this? Yeah, and I say this a lot, but like I finally became one of those singers that I was so envious of when I was younger, who warmed up and sang and practiced and got better and were just like very at ease with themselves and the world because you can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, like I looked at your resume and like I got on your website and everything and checked. Girl, by the way, that headshot is glorious.
Yeah, my friend Will took that. He's amazing.
Like, wait. And like I looked at your resume and I was like, obviously you still sang fairly well. It seemed like before the frenectomy. And so it's like coming out of it too. Like that was one thing because people like I've told people too, like yeah, I sing okay, but like, internally you don't feel okay like going through all that, even though like you're making headway, but it's not as fast as it could have been or like post frenectomy. And that was like something I was like gonna ask you about.
Yeah, I did get better. I don't want to just like totally, I don't mean to smack all my old teachers because that is not fair. They taught me a lot,
Yeah.
but I couldn't do what they taught me. They gave me a lot of knowledge and I wasn't able to apply it. I physically wasn't able to apply it. And I would try to apply it and I would be in physical pain singing. So, what I remember about some of my like bigger roles is that they were like real low points for me because I wasn't sure that I would actually be able to phonate at the end of Cozy. Like we had to take the second aria out. I would cheat and mark and like I would steal every bare second that I had in that whole opera, just hoping that I could save enough grains of sand to make it to the end. And I really do believe that even if I would have been like singing at bigger, better houses and whatever, I was very close to quitting before my first frenectomy because you like going through that was horrible because the pressure that's on you when you know you probably can't deliver is just it just eats your entire soul. And I just got the frenectomy because I was training to be a Myo and I figured I had to do that and whatever. And I had no clue about the kind of changes that would happen. And so I mean, it was like getting hit by a bus and showing up in heaven, like, oh my God, what happened? Where am I? Like suddenly I don't sing flat. Suddenly I don't have physical pain. Suddenly I can lay down and sing a high note. Like all these things were just showed up, like, now, like instantaneously slash 2 weeks later, and that's when I really became genuinely obsessed with what I do now is after I went through it. So yeah, yeah, I think, but everyone's story is different. I don't really think that you were in like physical pain, were
I
you?
mean, so I would get migraines after I sang. Like every recital I've ever given after an hour, because I could sing, but I would always practice in like half an hour increments and I'd take like a 10-15 minute break and then sing again. Um, but like after I would sing any performance, so like after Swore Angelica, I was Angelica, and then like any recital I gave during my DMA, migraine. And then after the two performances of Swore Angelica, which Swore Angelica is only an hour.
Yeah.
So after that double performance, I lost my voice for an entire week and a half, gone. And then I
Wow.
was, yeah, and then I was in Germany at, I was doing a voice competition and I was singing Queen of the Night. And I was coaching with the coaches for like a whole week, lost my voice entirely. And then I went on vocal rest for 4 days. And I think because I was so young, my voice recovered and I sang at the competition, but it felt terrible. And I wasn't sick. And so and everybody was like, you just have really severe anxiety. And they were like, should you really be doing this? Like your anxiety is just really bad. And I was like,
I know we can laugh about it now, but it is so dehumanizing when you're treated like that. You know? I mean, first of all, who the F wouldn't have anxiety about that? Like, oh, you're so anxious. Yeah, I am. You're right. Like,
I don't know what this is doing.
yeah, yeah. I think I have a very, very visceral memory of I had a lot of trouble staying in tune in my upper passaggio. Now we know that's tongue tie related, but I would try everything, drive it, loft it, more air, less air, change the vowel. Doesn't matter, right? It would all get like a little better, but it was never fixed. It was just forced. And I remember going to a coaching with one woman, and we were singing Iolanta's aria, and she, like on the piano, would hit the same note over again and make me sing it. No, sing it like this, sing it like this, sing it like this. No, this vowel, that vowel, la, 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 like just over and over and over. And I remember thinking, this is like living in hell where you just sing the same thing and it's always wrong.
It's like Dante's Inferno,
It
except
really was. I was like, this is it. This is the seventh center. Anyway, fun fact about that story. Got my tongue tie released by total like flipping happenstance. I met her again like 4 years later, and she literally didn't realize that I was the same person because my voice was able to change that much. And she turned out to be a big fan of mine. How funny is that?
that's
As
crazy.
in the coaching, she was like low key, like trying to convince me to quit.
Yeah.
It's like, some people just like aren't cut out for this. Like, how old are you? And oh, you've only done this. Okay.
I've had one of those.
Yeah.
Like some of us are just meant to be professors.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I hate that saying of those who can't do teach. I'm like, first of all, the people who can do it are the ones you should be learning from. Don't learn from the people that can't do it. Hello? So that's the student's problem right there. But also, like, yeah, I mean, don't you want a teacher who's been through what you've been through? Don't you want
Yes.
someone who can teach you from firsthand experience and who hopefully like knows people in the business right now that can help you? Isn't that what you want?